All right, should be good. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much
Hi
for
everyone.
joining us from wherever you may be joining, because we have a lot of people from HEC and also from all other corners of the world that are going to be joining for this conference. My name is Hanu. I'm going to be co-moderating the conference with Luca, who's also part of our association as sort of head of conferences. And like we said, thank you so much for joining. We're a fairly new association, and our goal, as you may know, is to essentially spread awareness about sports business, connect the community at HEC and even in other universities, other domains to people in sports. And today we're excited to bring you a very special and a very exciting panel focusing on venture capital in sports. Um, with a focus on Apex Capital, which is a major athlete driven venture capital firm with offices in Portugal and England as well. So, our panel today consists of Pedro, who is currently the COO at Apex. We also have Mafhungo from Scoreplay, which is a startup founded by an HEC alumni. It's a digital asset management startup that recently raised a $15 million funding round. So Mafhungo is the senior revenue manager at Scoreplay. And finally, we have Achille, who is the founder of SportsInvest Advisory, which is sort of an independent sports advisory firm which provides strategic, financial, and operational help to all sorts of people working in the sports business. And all three people here are, of course, part of the Apex ecosystem. So before we begin with the sort of set of questions that we have, guys, would you like to go in order and sort of just introduce yourselves, introduce the roles that you currently do, and anything else that you might find interesting? I guess we can start with Pedro, then go to Mafungo, and then to Ashil.
Sure. First of all, thanks for taking the time to have us here today and for organizing the panel. I appreciate it. We're very excited to join in. Obviously, HS is it's a great school and one of the best business schools in Europe and in the world. So it's a pleasure to be here. About us a bit, Apex, as Anu said, is essentially an asset management firm specialized in sports media and entertainment. Our biggest USP is that we have athletes as investors. So we are specialized in sports where we believe athletes are the most interesting, experienced, and strategic investors in this sector. And so we invest across several stages of the life cycle of a private company in this sector, from pre-seed to pre-IPO. We have both venture capital, growth, and private equity strategies. And so obviously we can support a company throughout their growth and life cycle within their private ownership. So we have started 4 years ago now. Two of our co-founders are athletes themselves, and I'm the COO, so I run everything from the operational side, finance, HR, legal, compliance, funds, etc. So I'm also part of the investment committees of Apex. I have a lot of responsibilities and essentially oversee all of these things within the company. But given that we are still a small company and a very young one, there's a lot of things to do, a lot of projects to manage, and so I touch upon almost everything that the company does. A bit more about me. I have a bachelor's in economics, master's in finance. I started working in global markets at a French bank, and then moved on to the buy side. And so I did mostly special sits and private debt before. Then moving on to the tech side, where I was in the exec team of a couple of startups. I raised more than 100 million euros for both of my startups, from pre-seed to Series B. So I was part of that hyper growth journey. And then I joined Apex, and I've been with Apex for almost 2.5 years now, and part of this crazy exponential growth that we've been so far. So yeah, so that's the 2-minute presentation. Hope that's okay. And if you have any questions, obviously happy to answer.
Thank you for the introduction. Very interesting journey. Mafhungo, would you like to go next?
Yes, happy to go next. So my name is Mafhungo. I am the Senior Manager in Revenue Operations at Scoreplay. For anyone who hasn't heard of Scoreplay, we are basically an AI-powered media infrastructure platform. And the main focus is we help organizations really transform how content moves from capture to audience. And we do this by automating very, very complex workflows that our customers have. And we help them to really focus more on, real-time fan engagement, as well as to maintain control over rights and usage. Scoreplay is a fairly young company, so it was founded in 2021 we have 2 co-founders. One is Victoria Ntisie, so he's an alum of this institution, as well as Xavier Green. We started out with just 4 employees in 2021, and now we're at about 50. We also recently had a funding round, and we've got some really, really key and institutional investors, very, very prominent as well. One of them being Apex Capital, who has been quite instrumental in our growth journey. We serve over 200 teams, leagues, and broadcasters worldwide. My role at the company, so I'm largely responsible for tools, processes, and strategy, which aligns quite a bit with my background. So I have a bachelor's in mathematics and statistics, and then a master's degree in international economics and an MBA. And my background was in management consulting. So prior to joining Scoreplay, that's where I was. And this role is a little bit of continuation of that. I get to work on some of the strategic direction of the organization. I get to build tools and processes and make sure that interdepartmentally there's a lot of harmony, and we're optimizing processes internally as much as possible. So yeah, that's a brief introduction.
Thank you so much. Achille?
Yes, hi everyone. Quickly on my side, I'm actually an alumni from this great school. I graduated in 2018 after doing the Master PIC with École Polytechnique, which I highly recommend, by the way. And then I've been working in the sports strategy and investment space for several years now, and I've had kind of 3 lives in sports. First one being as a strategy consultant at McKinsey for 4 years, between 18 and 22, working in the private equity practice and in the sports and media practice as well. And so mostly at the intersection of private equity and sports. That was the first life in strategy consulting. Second life on the investment side, where I spent a couple of years in private equity. Sorry. A couple of years on the PE side in a sports focused PE firm in London, and then in a generalist PE firm in Paris, where I was responsible for sports, media, entertainment investments. And a third life on the operational side of sports, where I've been lucky to spend 2 amazing seasons in private equity and family office-owned football clubs. The first one being the Toulouse Football Club in 2021, following the acquisition by Redbird Capital Partners, and the second one being FC Versailles in the 3rd division this season, 24-25. And based on the 3 lives in sports, I founded a few years ago a company called SportsInvest Advisory, which is providing strategic, financial, and operational advisory to sports, and is founded as a collective of independent sports experts. And for the anecdote, I've also been supporting and cheering for Scoreplay for many years now. I was lucky enough to meet Victorien and Xavier back in the end of 2020 when I had just joined the Toulouse Football Club, and I received a LinkedIn message from Victorien saying that he had a great idea to pitch the Toulouse Football Club. And French football clubs have been historically a bit careful about innovation and tech, but I really liked Victorien's approach, and I tried to open the door of Toulouse to them. And then obviously they did an amazing job since then.
Thank you, Achille. Excited to have you all three here for tonight. And first, let's move with our first question. And first, we're going to talk about a bit the Apex way of investing. So Pedro, a first question for you. As you might have said before, Apex has three defining traits. I think first, it partners exclusively with athletes as LPs. Second, it invests in sports, media, and entertainment landscape. And three, you operate both a VC and growth PE strategy. So you have quite a complex one and a new investment philosophy in the industry. How do you pitch this model to potential portfolio companies and to the entrepreneurs? And what sets you apart in these increasingly crowded investment landscape?
Sure. It's a great question. Let me just give you a small note on it. We don't just exclusively partner with athletes as LPs. We have many other LPs. We just think, and publicly, the mostly well-known LPs are the athletes, and they're the most strategic ones. So unfortunately, we couldn't raise enough capital to deploy in this space, raising only from athletes. We need to tap different pools of capital and institutional capital to do so. Having said that, exactly what you mentioned, those three things definitely set us apart, and I think those three are the most powerful things we can pitch to an investor. And so when we come to a potential company, to a potential founder, we bring in case studies, we bring in proof, and kind of our ecosystem with us. And that starts before we even invest an euro into the company. It starts when we are talking with the company, defining. I think there's someone not muted, but as I was saying, it starts with due diligence. It starts with when you're discussing a deal, when you're performing due diligence on the company, where we rely upon our ecosystem, our athletes, our connections, other companies, other founders, to do exactly that. So the combination of athletes, the ecosystem that we built, and the expertise that we've built ourselves by being truly one of the few investors specifically in sports media and entertainment, and not investing anything else, gives us a lot of leverage to have those conversations, and for the founders and the companies to understand very quickly that, first of all, we can help them, and we can differentiate. We can be differentiators in their cap table, and we can provide more than capital. And I think that's all that companies are looking for. Yeah. It's really someone that can help them in this journey with them, that they can understand the industry and can help them on their way. And we start to do that very early in the process. And so, for example, with Scoreplay, it's a great example where the way we did due diligence was by introducing them to a couple of clubs, a couple of leagues, and going through their sales motion with them, and kind of understanding how they work, understanding how they pitch to the companies, to the clubs, to the leagues, and going through that with them to understand where can we help, is the product good enough, is this something that they want. And so it becomes a part of the process. They are involved in every step of the way, but also we can prove our model to them, and we can prove that our ecosystem, that our industry knowledge is relevant and can be it can be at their disposal once we invest.
Thank you, Pedro. That makes a lot of sense. And I think it's a perfect segue to ask Mafhungo about the relationship between Scoreplay and Apex. So like you said, of course, partnering with someone like Apex brings a lot of know-how, brings a lot of potential clients that you can sort of work with. But what other impacts have there been off of this relationship and between Scoreplay and Apex, Mafhungo? And is there a different dynamic compared to, let's say, traditional investors that you would have reached out to? And is there something else that you would like to say about essentially the Apex value add when it comes to your particular company?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and thanks, Pedro, as well for introducing some of the processes that went into validating us as a partner, as an investment vehicle. I think I would summarize the impact that Apex has had probably in 4 key areas, and Pedro touched on a few of them as well. But I think the first one is strategic growth. Because of Apex's knowledge of the European markets, markets in general, of industries, we're able to get a really great strategic partner, and not just someone who is investing in the organization, which is quite important. The second was network access. It's quite difficult as a startup getting into certain networks, and I think Apex provided great validation for us, and really access into provide key access to really key potential clients, and helped us along the way in that sense. The third would be adding credibility as well. We were quite fortunate to have Apex as an investor, and it really helps when it's an institution that already has some credibility in the market, which adds additional credibility, and it's a stamp of approval in a sense. And the last is, given their knowledge of the industry and some of the organizations as well that they invested in, we were able to leverage that for operational support. It ties in a little bit to strategic support as well. And so it differed quite a lot from a traditional or institutional investor who may not have that in-depth industry knowledge and may not also be able to essentially walk through with the organization along the way. And this felt like a really great partnership for Scoreplay.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Achille, the next question is for you, and it focuses on athlete-led investing. So in recent years, we've seen, and in recent months even more so, a huge trend of athletes from all sorts of sports, particularly in football, investing in a lot of things, whether they may be other clubs or sort of businesses that exist on the sidelines. You at FC Versailles are of course familiar with that, with Pierre Gasly also being one of the sort of partner investors of the club. So how do you view this trend from the sort of advisory sort of side? Do you think it's here to stay? Do you think it's something that can potentially, let's say, go wrong or be characterized as a fad if not done well because of how many people are now entering it and because of how popular it seems to be? Or do you think it's sort of a natural progression in sport that the people that are sort of the primary stakeholders are the ones that are now taking ownership roles in it? So what are your thoughts in general on athlete-led investing, and do you think there's something that we should keep in mind when it comes to that over the next few years?
Again, a great question, and quite vast, but I'll try to keep it concise. I think for those of you who are interested in the topic, before digging into what happens in Europe with obviously great firms like Apex, it's always really interesting to get some context about the other side of the Atlantic, because obviously US, and when it comes to athletes and even former coaches and professionals, players like turning into investments and entrepreneurship. So the US always had a bit of advance on that. I don't need to recall the full history, but what has been really interesting from a US perspective, and what I think we should try and replicate as much as we can in Europe as well, is avoiding the shortcut that athletes are only meant to invest in sports organizations and sports teams, which is a bit the natural first thinking that people have in mind, like their only credibility when you were a professional footballer or professional NFL player, your only credibility is to invest in teams of your own sports. I think the US has been really pioneering the expansion of potential investments and even entrepreneurial ventures, like creating companies like the Spring Hill company, which is LeBron James' media studio, production studio. They've been really great in that. And I think that now, obviously, it makes more headlines when an athlete investment goes into a football club. We've been hearing a lot about that in Europe. But I think what's interesting about firms like Apex and other VC firms and athlete-led investment firms in Europe that are trying different models is to broaden the range of athlete investments, not only focus them on team ownership, and that's what Apex has been doing from the beginning with a very interesting VC angle. We have a great firm doing that in France as well, the Atletico Ventures. Some firms are also like athlete-led, like Maturity's Origins fund, but they're trying to broaden the range even more and look at assets that are not necessarily in the sports sector. So Blaise Maturidis is doing a lot of firms is doing a lot of investments in consumer and tech with the team pact model as well in France, which is interesting because they think about the value that athlete can bring on a very different level, and they actually have two investment verticals which are climate and healthcare, so nothing to do with sports, but they try to bring in athletes as like business partners and almost coaches and mentors to the founders of the companies that they invest in. And that's really interesting, and kudos to Apex for pioneering that in Europe. And actually, last time I had a chat with Antonio, the founder of Apex, a few weeks ago. Again, he confirmed that they were not, and I think that's what makes Apex so differentiating. They don't see just athletes as providing capital; they see athletes as partners. And Pedro, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Antonio confirmed me that you were getting a lot of inbound and athletes willing to invest in Apex. And now you were so successful that you came to the point where you're actually filtering athletes willing to invest in Apex based on their commitment to bring more than capital and their commitment to be active, to sit on the board of the companies you invest in, and to be real partners in the growth of Apex and your portfolio companies. And I think that's great.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and to what you pointed, there are models in the US, but I think what we've done here in Europe is different in two main ways. First of all, obviously, as you said, we are what we say to athletes is you shouldn't invest all your money with us. You should invest only a part of your capital with us. Obviously, we invest in venture capital, invest in private equity, so these are probably the riskiest asset classes there are. So you shouldn't by any means invest a lot of your net worth, a lot of your capital with us. You should maybe 10 to 20% at most of your capital should be invested with us. But what we want then is 90% of the time that you spend on your investments, because you're not going to make a difference if you invest in Coca-Cola, if you invest in ETF, if you invest in real estate. Not going to add value by spending a lot of time for that. You should definitely have someone that is specialized in those sectors do that for you. But with sports, you can definitely provide a lot of value. You definitely understand the market. You definitely can understand the dynamics, and you can be of help and add a lot of value. And I mentioned before, this starts before the investment is even made, and then obviously after the investment, you can help us guide the companies. You can help us understand a bit where the levers for growth are in the industry, where this particular investment can grow into or with, and so there are a lot of different things that an athlete can provide more than their capital, and it's exactly right. It's something that we've done. But I think the second part of it is that rather than doing that by themselves, what we've created is an ecosystem, and that's I think the real value of what we've created is that we're not just, it's not LeBron James, it's not Michael Jordan, it's not even Mike Matuidi, or so it's it's hundreds of athletes from, I think right now we have more than 17 different sports represented. It's men, it's women, it's very large athletes from F1 drivers to then a player in Egypt, for example, or in Turkey. So it's different minds, different people, different stages in their career. So some of them, I just met an F3 driver, Formula 3. So he's 16 or 15, and we were speaking because he saw what we're doing and he thinks it's cool. From then guys like Chiellini, for example, that are at the tail end or are finished their career very recently. So it's broad. But it's a community, and there's a lot to add from being in a community because they have all different perspectives. They can not only help us, but also help each other and kind of connect with each other to kind of bring the best out of all of them, not only in this, but also in other aspects in their personal life, kind of their sporting careers as well. So I think that those are kind of the two key things that we've built with the athletes that are very differentiated from all the other people that are doing this and all the other athletes that are doing this. It's definitely the community and how they add value and how we provide value to them as well, because you cannot only take, you also have to give, and so we provide them with some experiences, we provide them with knowledge, we provide them with this community, and so they feel that they're part of something, and it's beneficial for them as well, not only for what they're doing now, but also thinking about what they do next. And I was having this conversation last week with a former athlete on the transition after they stopped playing, or driving, or at the end of their careers. It's very difficult for them to switch their focus onto something else, and this could be it, right? And this is something that they can try to build while they are still relevant, while they're still at high level in their careers. But just taking a bit of time, going through those experiences is very invaluable to them, and it's something that they appreciate as well.
I think really building this diversity and this diversity of profiles within your community is really, really interesting. Maybe let's move now to another topic, which is diversifying your portfolio, but beyond solely team ownership, and maybe as well tapping into sport adjacent businesses, which is currently what you're doing as part of your VC strategy. Maybe to give a bit of context, as part of it's fair to say that the boom in the sports industry, which is now more considered as an asset class, most investments that have caught the focus and of the media have been investments of PE in teams, especially football clubs or such as in big sports. But you as Apex have a differentiating approach. You've invested in Scoreplay that we love here in HEC, but as well in Exis or Playsight that are both companies at the intersections of sports and tech, and especially AI. So do you think these sport adjacent businesses are where the big next returns will come from and the most promising assets?
Absolutely. Look, ultimately, private equities and investing in clubs, in leagues, it trickles down and it provides clubs, the leagues, and kind of the whole industry a lot of capital to deploy new solutions, to invest in the way we communicate with the fans, the way you understand what the fans are doing, the way you commercialize and you grow your revenue, the way you play the sport, even the way you distribute your media assets, like what Scoreplay is doing. So the capital that has been deployed in sports has meant that sports as an industry needs to professionalize. It needs new tools. It needs a new way to keep growing that capital, because obviously if private equity is investing, they expect a return. And so that return will definitely come on being able to better know your fans, to better know how you commercialize your assets, and that those can be commercial, those can be sporting, and those can be real estate or hospitality or events or whatever that means. But and also how you perform, your team or your sporting assets perform better. And so those are definitely the three things that we see where teams can definitely do better, leagues can definitely do better, and tech is going to be the way for them to do it at an unprecedented scale, and with very much the quickness to adoption will mean that the teams that are quick to adopt will probably win, or will have an unfair advantage or a fair advantage against other teams, leagues, and sports. And so we've seen this with several sports. Football was very slow to adopt technology, and now it's kind of financially in trouble. And for example, the French league is a good example of that, and we can talk a bit more about that later. But we've seen other sports like F1, for example, relying on tech, relying on tech solutions and data to kind of become a better spectacle, become a better viewing experience, and of course they become more profitable, they become more viable and can grow faster because of it. So we definitely think those what you call auxiliary or kind of sporting adjacent will actually become very much a part of the sporting industry, and will become household names by themselves because of it.
Perfect. And Mafhungo, sort of going straight on from that, as Pedro talks about modernizing, professionalizing, and sort of bringing about a digital transformation in sport. So, of course, Scoreplay, I think you mentioned a bit on the platform and what exactly it does, but can you shed some light on how exactly it makes life easier for the sort of clients that you take on? What is it that Scoreplay has that other sort of platform providers don't? And do you think that also while you're approaching clients and while you're sort of going about this transformation, do you think there's still a mentality shift that is required in these organizations, or do you think it's simply just a matter of technology and that people are actually quite willing to change, but they just simply haven't had the tools for that? Or do you actually think that there's still a sort of legacy mindset in sport?
Yeah, sure. Before I proceed, I saw there's a hand up. I don't know if Anna, if you wanted to ask a question, or if we do that at the end.
We can do that at the end, Anna, if it's okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
No worries. So I think you would think that a lot of sports organizations are have digitalized a lot more than they have, and I think Pedro painted a little picture. But let me go a little bit further than that and explain what some of our prospects, customers, what their workflows look like before Scoreplay comes in. So you would have media that is captured from a match, and it's then uploaded, and it's uploaded using platforms like Google Drive. It's sent via email, and it's often stored manually. So it's then transferred onto some sort of physical drive, and it's sometimes stored manually on the premise. So if anyone knows about risk of having data on the premise and not decentralized, then you know how dangerous that can be as well. And then there's no way often of tagging it. If someone, for example, from PR or from sponsorship needs that data, someone has to manually go and look for the specific drive. And it seems quite archaic, but some of our prospects, again, and our customers didn't have any platform that allows them to centralize the data, to upload it, to have real-time tagging, to then allow them to distribute it instantly. And that gives you an idea of basically what Scoreplay comes and does. It's an end-to-end solution. So they are able to better manage their data. It really helps as well with commercialization. I know Pedro mentioned it a little bit, but the ability to then use that data to either sell it off, or find new revenue streams for teams or leagues that are in trouble. That can be quite transformational for an organization. And that's what Scoreplay essentially does. And why it's different from competitors is, as I mentioned, it's an end-to-end solution. So some of our competitors will, for example, only be able to do one aspect of this process that I just explained, where Scoreplay allows you to go through the entire process and only have the one tool that you need. And that's how we differ. And what we found is that a lot of teams, they either are not entirely aware of how archaic their systems are. So sometimes it's an entire league, or it's a federation, and everyone is sort of kept in the dark. And so one thing we also try and really do is empower prospects and customers to get to know what's going on outside of their ecosystems and the bubbles that they exist in, and connect them as well with other teams, help them leverage our technology, as well as other complementary tools as well. So that's one issue, is just they've operated that way for so long. No one was there to really tell them that there's a better way of doing it, or that it's super time consuming, or that they're losing out on potential revenue. And then the second is that often teams believe that revolutionary or changing that entire system will be exceptionally time consuming and will be exceptionally cost consuming. So it would be a huge burden. And we're really able to tailor our solution based on what the client needs and whatever restrictions they have. So that's also something that's a little bit different about Scoreplay. And I think that it's really interesting to see how as soon as clubs and federations really get started, or they get onto that train, they become super excited about what other technology exists and how else they can continue to transform. Yeah, and that's in essence what Scoreplay is.
Great, super interesting. Thank you, Mafhungo. Let's move on now with Achille. And if you may want to talk a bit about the new hot and emerging segments in sports, especially the rise of alternative leagues. We've seen the rise of new leagues such as the Kings League, Bowlers League in football, but as well TGL, which is backed by Apex and founded by Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy.
Bowler as well.
Butter as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So what do you think is driving this trend? Do you think is it fan fatigue with traditional formats, or just something deeper? And do you think they're here to compete against traditional leagues, or they're just an add-on and an additional format that will coexist with these traditional leagues?
I think maybe starting with the last part of your question, because it's always something that we've been hearing about emerging leagues, how they would be direct competitors with traditional sports as we know it. This is something that personally I'm not agreeing at 100% with. Latest example, you mentioned the Bowler League, but the Kings League, for example, has been pretty early in the way they decided to partner with existing football organizations, like in Italy, and the Serie A and Juve and Marseille is going to have a partnership with the Kings League in France as well. So I think we've always been hearing the catastrophist speech about Gen Z not caring about sports anymore and not caring about football anymore, and how these new leagues bring something that traditional sports can't, and that basically it's going to be one or the other winning the ultimate war. I think that's a bit catastrophist and
Sure.
and pessimistic. I think that overall, of course, there are problems to fix with traditional sports as we know it. French football is a great example of that. But I think that overall, like, I'm more optimistic about the way I think about those leagues. I think young people are and not so young people anymore, like myself, were like more and more eager of having new experiences, having new entertainment opportunities, discovering new sports, discovering new leagues, and it's more like, and I think obviously, hopefully, with the development of AI in the years to come, we'll have more and more free time and spend less time behind our computers and more time watching sports and playing sports and participating in live events. That's where the world is going, and so I think the optimistic way to think about that, that's always what I try to keep for myself, is that it's not a given pie where the share of traditional sports will decline and get eaten by new emerging leagues. It's more about the pie getting bigger, people realizing that it's fun to watch chess, that it's fun to go to a Kings League event, that it's actually pretty complementary to existing sports. And so I think that in the end, it will be more about, people having more free time, so more able to catch and more models to think about. And that obviously the number and the intensity of new emerging leagues being created every week, almost everywhere in the world, is a bit intense and a bit crazy right now. So most of them won't be there in a couple of years. But I think that some of them who find the right model, who partner smartly with existing sports and so on, will be here to stay and will be excellent complement to sports as we know it. And a last optimistic point as well is that they're forcing, is kind of a wake-up call for traditional sports, and they're forcing old school sports organizations, like established sports leagues and established sports and even declining sports like baseball in the US. It's a wake-up call and it's a reality check for them to keep innovating, to keep improving the product. And so I think that overall the pie gets bigger, and the experience and innovation push from existing and traditional sports leagues gets stronger as well.
Just do you think these leagues cater to the same audience as traditional leagues? For example, I mean, they're often criticized by diehard fans because it's not, too innovative for them. Do you think, it caters to maybe a more young and a consumer profile that's not interested at the beginning in the sport itself, but more about the influencers or that are leading the projects or the athletes?
I think what's interesting is that I was mentioning the catastrophic speeches that we hear every day. On both sides, if you put established sports leagues and emerging sports leagues, on both sides we'll have die-hard fans, as we call them, basically blaming the other side for everything that's wrong about sports. So old school football fans and die-hard fans will talk trash about Kings League and Baller League, saying that it's nothing and it's not here to stay. And on the other side, people will defend emerging sports leagues by saying that traditional football is dying. I think that that's the difference between noise and insights. A lot of noise at the two extremes of the spectrum, and overall, I think that the path forward is in rational thinking about all that and taking the best out of the two worlds, if we put that in some kind of war between them, and improving sports overall for everyone.
100% agree with you.
Yeah, and ultimately, there's both can be true, I guess, and I think there will probably be a mix of both, right? But first of all, it always takes time. So traditional sports will not end tomorrow, and new emerging leagues will not win their share and eat or kill traditional sports in the next year or the next 5 years or even the next 10 years. But we'll definitely have, as I think Achille said, I think being complementary is the right word. Making the pie bigger is the right analogy. I think the mix will change. I think Achille was a bit too optimistic there. I think the mix will definitely change, where some of it will be cannibalized, but the pie will be bigger. So there will be space for both. And look, ultimately, if you think about it objectively, if you're a golf fan, you might like TGL, but you also will like to watch Augusta. You will always like to watch the PGA Championship. You always like the Master. So they're definitely complementary, and I think the best emerging leagues understand that they can cater to both traditional sports fans, diehard fans, as you call it, and bring in some new fans and engage them in a different way and make a product that is enticing to them as well. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, but we will definitely see that battle being played out very publicly, very loudly, but ultimately that's also good for both of them, right? Because that discussion also revives people's interest, also creates more content for people to see, to watch, to engage with. So ultimately, it's even if it could, if it's different, they'll both win, I would say.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense and a lot of food for thought there. Just very quickly for this next question for, I guess, like a minute each or even less. Pedro and Mafhungo, whether as a fan or whether as a professional, I guess we can start with Pedro. What is another trend or a couple of trends that you think are really exciting alongside these new leagues, whether it may be, sports in a certain geography or women's sports or a new sport on its own? Is there anything that you think is equally exciting that we should keep an eye on? Starting with you, Pedro.
Depends on again, we've talked about tech, we've talked about different sports, emerging sports leagues. That's, there's not a lot more, right? Because that encompasses a lot of it. I think I actually mentioned some of them will not be here tomorrow, and I think that's definitely the case. So for me, it's about specific, and when we talk about all of these things, we then need to be aware that the devil lies in the details, and that there are some that will definitely be the future, but not all of them. And so I would point definitely women's sports as if you want to call it an emerging league or an emerging sport, sure, but then within women's sports, is it women's football? Is it women's paddle? Is it pickleball? Is it baseball, for example? I think some of these will work. Most of them will probably not. Tech is the very great differentiator, and those who will be tech enabled. And I think Achille, probably can speak a bit better than I do on this. It's very different to build a club from scratch, where you can be right away tech enabled, very quick, very agile, a different approach to doing things than being Paris Saint-Germain and trying to change it gradually from within and going through that change. So it's there are not there are obviously very specific things that we think can win out. Women's sports are one of them. In tech, we think performance will be great. There's also fan engagement. Obviously, the way the clubs, leagues engage with fans. There's also mass participation in sports, so tools or platforms that will allow you to spread out the word and kind of put people to practice or to engage with the sport. Will be one of the winners. Obviously, you can't go wrong with saying that AI will change very much the game, but I think live events will continue to be also one of the key areas. I think sports is probably one of the few assets, a few entertainment assets in the world where live is still very much relevant. You can think of movies, you can think of many other things where news, the way you consume things live just doesn't matter so much anymore, but sports will probably be one of the few that's the case. And so live events and people coming together to watch something will continue to be relevant and something that will definitely grow in the future, because sports is more than entertainment. It's also a way for you to connect with friends, family, with people from your city, people that share an experience, an ideal, something they believe in. So that will also be very, very important as we grow more and more to a digitalized society. So there's definitely a few things. I think we would be here all day if we wanted to talk about each and in every one of those more specifically.
Mm-hmm. And Mafhungo, is there something from your end that excites you, or whether as a fan or whether something that you're tracking actively at Scoreplay that could be the next sort of market that you try to capture?
Yeah, there are a few things that are quite interesting, and I think Pedro has mentioned quite a lot of them. But one thing that we've seen that there's a huge emphasis on, and this is not necessarily new, but it's just highlighted a lot more, is athletes being brands individually and how that contributes to the team, and how the team can then continue to monetize that. And of course, a little bit of a self plug, but apps like Scoreplay do help quite a lot with fan engagement. But that's one of the things. The second is what we've seen is we often have very global sports and federations, but there's been a bit of a shift in how they can localize some of the content based on wherever they're operating. So how can they make it a little bit more personal to the fan in whatever region that they are? And it ties back to what we're saying about, emerging leagues versus sort of traditional organizations in sports. Ultimately, when there is some sort of technological disruption and someone new on the block, traditional organizations do have a bit of an existential threat. And making sure that they move with their times, they connect correctly with local audiences, that they're immediately available. So real-time content, super important. Are you the first to post that highlight versus just having it there much later? So those are some of the trends that we've seen on the market.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Luca, you want to take the next one?
Yeah, sure. Let's move on to a topic that we wanted to talk about, which is football club investments. So with soaring valuations over the past years, minority stakes have become quite the norm for most investors. And yet Venezia FC and the FC Versailles, two clubs which you are tied with respectively, Pedro and Achille, have taken a different path, investing in smaller clubs rooted in cities, in local cities with strong cultural heritage and global recognition. What do you think are the strategic advantages of this model, and can it offer, in your opinion, a more sustainable and differentiated path to long-term value creation?
Pedro,
Achille, you want to start? Yeah, sure.
Versailles is only following the great ideas that Venezia has, so I'll let you start first.
Sure. Look, yeah, I think if you're investing in football, and again, we're talking very specifically about football, which might not be true to other sports. I think the only way we would invest in football is if there's more to it than the sporting success, so to speak, because ultimately you can't, or at least it's our view, it's not every investor's view, but it's our particular view, that we can't underwrite sporting success into our financial business model. And so there's too many variables. Obviously, the more you invest, the more likely you are to win. But you can see last year Bayern Leverkusen didn't have the best budget. There's every year there's very examples where the team with the best budget doesn't win. And so even with investing a lot of capital, a lot of money into it, you're not guaranteed. You just have a slightly higher chance, which obviously, if you're a private equity investor, that's not something that you want to underwrite on. And so local clubs that you mentioned, with something specific, with something unique, definitely can bring something other than sporting success to the table. They can bring in, global recognition, as you have with Versailles, as you have with Venezia. They can bring unique 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 experiences in a way that, again, other clubs can't. Obviously, you can go to Manchester or you can go to Liverpool, but you're not going to go, it's not Venezia, or it's not Versailles, or it's not Paris, or something, or some other beautiful city with a lot of history, with a lot of things to do and to see, other than going to a football match. And so, no disrespect, obviously, to Manchester or Liverpool, but there's definitely more to these than football. But football can create a differentiation, can potentialize, can really create a reason for you to come, and then to do all the other things. And so you can blend them two together, and you can merge hospitality, you can merge branding, as we're trying to do with Venezia, where we're partnered with Drake to for the kids and for the lifestyle section. So you can do a lot of different things that you can definitely underwrite, and you can commercialize, and you can grow other than the sporting success. Sporting success, I wouldn't say it's secondary, but it's very important, but it's not what you underwrite from a financial perspective and from your capital deployment perspective. And so it needs to be there. It needs to be well managed. You definitely should keep investing, at least for your fans to be happy and for you to have the best chance of success as possible. But you just don't rely upon it 100% in order for you to make sure that you hit your business model and your underwriting. So definitely that's what those clubs provide that others simply can't.
Achille, would you like to add to that a little bit, or?
That was really interesting from Pedro, to be honest, and being aware that we have some questions and that I need to run in 10 minutes.
Perfect. So we'll just ask sort of one final question to you guys, and then we'll open the floor up to Q&A. And that's a very generic question and we can start with you, Mafhungo, and then move on to the other two. Is what advice would you give to young people like us that are now looking to build a career in the business side of sports? Super exciting time, of course, and sports as an asset class seems to defy a lot of economic uncertainty as well. But there are, of course, a lot of issues in the job market now as well. So keeping all of those things in mind, what advice quickly would you give to people like us? What should we look at? What should we prioritize? What should our approach be if we want to do something big in sports? And yeah, Mafhungo, we can start with you.
Yeah. So I'd say we've mentioned quite a bit the tech that goes into sports. So it's always good to be quite tuned in to all the latest technological advancements. It's always good to have a base level understanding and skill in tech. That helps a lot. Sports is still very relationship driven. And I know sometimes when you go into a job, you're really focused on the core skills. And sometimes you forget about the soft skills that you need as well. So I would say people shouldn't overlook the softer skills, the ability to build relationships that you will need in sports. And I'd say the third thing is just being adaptable. It's a changing world, I think, in most industries, but sports as a whole is be teachable, be adaptable, and just be hungry to learn. That's what I'd say.
Thank you so much. Achille, from you next.
One advice, one word: try. Try different things. There is no one way of working in sports. I think a lot of people not to sound too pessimistic this time, but overestimate or underestimate the sacrifices and the compromises that you sometimes have to do and to accept to work in sports. It's definitely not the same working in a tier 2 football club as spending 30 years being an executive in Nike. And although those are two examples of working in sports, it's not the same being a senior partner in the sports practice at McKinsey or ending up in an investment firm doing deals in sports. So there are many ways. So for me, just like you're at HEC, you're lucky, you have a great CV, you have a gap year that is designed for that. So try different things, try to do investment banking, try to do PE, try to do consulting, try early on in your career to actually work at the core of sports. Because again, I receive countless messages about being a head of strategy or chief of staff in a football club. But there are, again, many compromises to make. You won't have the same status or financial success if you spend your life in a football club versus working in consulting or investment banking. So yeah, just try different things. Don't dream about working in sports necessarily. It's an interesting industry for sure. There are other as well, and the most dangerous shortcut to make at your stage of your career is I love sports, so I want to work in sports. Like this is really not the good way of thinking about that. So please, when you reach out, don't say I love football, so I want to work in a football club. If you love football, don't work in a football club. That's my ending line.
Yeah, thank you. And Pedro, finally from you on this.
For me, it's simple and it's complementary to what Achille said, which is find something that you enjoy and that you find interesting, invest in it, learn it, be that one person that knows more about that subject than anyone else, or at least do that over a number of years, over a number of careers, over a number of different roles, but focus on those things that you find interesting, and the rest will sort itself out. If you find something interesting, if you learn a lot about it, and if you practice on that, if you keep yourself updated, if you invest time in it, then at some point, someplace, someone will pay you for it, and so it will take care of itself. So that's my short advice.
Perfect. Thank you so much, guys, for your insights. And now I guess since we're short on time, we'll move on to questions. Anna, you've been waiting for a while, so feel free to ask your question, and then we'll move on to Clement and Hugo as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And it's so very nice to meet you all. So thank you for organizing this and coming. I wanted to ask probably a question more specified for Mr. Pedro Sousa. I wanted to ask, I can imagine that it is very different talking to LPs that are athletes and LPs that are more traditional LPs, let's say family offices. I wanted to ask, what are the different selling points, or do you approach these conversations in a different way when talking to an athlete? Because I can see that on your website, you also say that you guide the athletes through the investment. They don't have to be experienced in investments, and I'm guessing they are usually not, since they are doing something else as their job. Yes, I wanted to ask whether there are different selling points. Do you approach these conversations in a different way? Or is it more or less the same thing? And also taking into account what Mr. Achille said, that you have a lot of athletes coming to you. So is it also something that you have to approach the athletes, or are they coming to you?
Sure. So two questions. The first one, it's a great question. It's a great question, and yes, the answer is yes. We do have to adapt our, let's call it, pitch to different types of investors. Obviously, with athletes, the conversation is not only about the capital, but it's also about their thoughts on the industry, kind of how can they be involved, what can they bring to the table to the community, what we can offer to them as well. So it's, I would say, a more informal conversation. And the decision-making process is completely different, right? So a family office, they would have to, you'd have to meet with 3 or 4 or 5 different people. It takes anywhere from 3 to 12 months to raise from an institutional. There you meet a lot of different people within the organization. You have to have a champion. You have to go through DD. You have to answer. I just received on Friday afternoon 100 questions from an investor, very well-known investor, nevertheless very strategic, with 100 questions. After seeing all of our data rooms, presentations, etc., etc. So an athlete, he doesn't do that, right? And so yes, you have to adapt the conversation. Even the way you approach it is different. The way you talk about it is different. And obviously the relationship you build is different, and that's why we have 2 different teams. We have an investor relations team that focus on the institutional side of things, and then we have an athlete relations team that focus on not only but also on the athletes coming in. They also obviously do the ecosystem, managing those relationships and so on. And that also brings me to your second question, which is the way we think about our athletes, our athlete partners and our athlete LPs is thinking about a community. And so in terms of, there's a lot of them that come to us via Instagram, via email. They ask referrals from other from their teammates or other athletes that they know. But the one, and so I would say 80 or 90% of the athletes that are investing with us, that are new to our community, come through that. But the ones we do actually reach out to and kind of do some outreach, we think about gaps in our ecosystem and gaps into our community. So let's say I have a very good, we have a bunch of golf players, for example, but we don't have any female ones, let's imagine. So let's try and find some female golf players to add to our community and to kind of give the other perspective from the sport. So we are very targeted in the type of outreach we do, and we focus on not only not finding X number of athletes in the next 6 months, but where do we want to focus in the next 3 to 6 months? Where are the gaps in the current athlete landscape? Let's focus on that. And so female athletes are a big one. We focused on that in the last 12 months, and we've added quite a few. So one cyclist, a couple of female football players. So we have a runner, a marathon run. So different sports, different things that we can again make the community as much as wider and have as much overview over across sports, across geographies, across across times within our community. So that's what we focus on.
I just have a very small follow-up question, if I may. So I can also imagine that the different pieces have a value add. I wanted to ask whether the traditional LPs have more of a passive role where they just invest and they're not on any boards, because you mentioned that the athletes are on. Okay.
Yes,
okay.
As is traditional to most institutional LPs. Obviously, they can.
Yeah, exactly.
There are more strategic than others, but yeah, most of them just are happy to have their financial return. Obviously, being slightly involved in going to some events, understanding a bit more about the industry, and but mostly passive, yes.
And then the athletes actually take part in and take seats on boards and are more active.
We have several ways for them to get involved, from due diligence to post investment. And we do, for example, roundtables just with athletes and our companies. I think Scoreplay was in one of those. So there are several ways where they can, not just one, where they can be involved.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm not going to take more time. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Clement, would you like to ask your question? Yeah, we can't hear you. You can type it out, and Hugo, in the meantime, if you'd like to ask yours while Clement types his question out.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me well?
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, we can.
Hi everyone. Thank you guys for organizing this, and thank you to all of you speakers. It was very interesting to hear different stories, but in the same time, we all feel that there is a kind of corporate background. You come from consulting, banking, M&A, private equity. You were mentioning before, Achille, if I'm not mistaken, that there is a need to try new things and everything, but I still feel that there is this, and I think I'm actually asking you these questions in order to confirm all the words of mouth that there is about this, to say that it's easier in order to break into the sports industry, even if there's no general rule, to have a more corporate background, more investment-based background, rather than doing the opposite, maybe starting to deep dive into the sports industry, and afterwards, maybe specializing into the investment side, rather than doing the opposite. Getting this financial background, investment background first, or corporate or strategy, and afterwards jumping into a sport industry, and to be more more bankable, if we can say. Also, I'm focusing a bit on you, Achille, because I'm actually a French student studying a master in corporate finance. You know what it is to be French, and the importance of masters and things like this. In the job market, I know that it's very specific to France also when you have the French nationality, and harder to work in France when you don't have these backgrounds. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks for your question. I'm gonna have to make it quick because I really have to run. But so honestly, it's not easy to answer because that's my very specific opinion. But trying to answer in a very rational way. Sports actually, and especially if you're talking about professional sports like leagues and teams, and that's going to be very generic, so sorry about that. They don't like generalist profiles. A professional sports club, football or league or whatever, they don't understand what a profile with a M&A or consulting background can do. Okay, and I tried that several years ago when I was trying to have my first experience in sports. And it had to be like a perfect storm of Redbird acquiring a team, me being connected to the new top management, looking for a 1-year secondment from McKinsey, the management seeing the value of having a head of strategy and transformation within the club for 1 year. So it was really a perfect storm, and I was really, really lucky. Otherwise, try reaching out to clubs and leagues saying that you're a strategy consultant or an M&A banker, and they won't understand where to put you in the organization. So if you're really sure 100%, I want to work in a football club or I want to work in a rugby league right now, you have to, that's the current status of the market, especially in Europe. It's less true in the US, but in Europe, it's like, okay, can you do sponsorship? Can you do ticketing? Are you a marketing guy? Are you working in finance? And so if that's sure for you that you want to work in a football club, for me, the easiest way, and it's a bit of a bet when you're coming from HEC and you can basically do everything, like specialized in a very specific vertical, very specific expertise, and try to make your way in sports through that. That's the generic answer. Now, my advice as an HEC alumni, obviously it seems exciting. You're very early in your career. When I was your age, I thought I wanted to work in advertising because I had seen the movie 99 francs and I thought it was awesome. So you're still very early in your career. Don't make crazy choices right now. Very few people actually know what they want to do for sure for the rest of their life when they're in school. So that's more like an ex-HEC talking to you. Try to take the opportunity of the gap year of maybe a second month when you're in consulting to test your appetite for sports. But my advice for you is like, don't do HEC to end up being sponsorship manager in a football club. Try. That's always going to be like it's the same advice that I give my little brother as well. So it's more like a big bro advice. Do things at the beginning of your career that will be useful wherever you end up. So always like that's my careful approach. But I think it's great to continue your training post HEC with a very solid organization like consulting or investment banking and PE. And when you're in these organizations, try to network internally. If you're at McKinsey, try to connect with the guys who do a few sports projects from time to time. Get a few opportunities like that, and then you'll see. But being sure now, as early in your career, that you want to do sports for the rest of your life, I think is a bit too early and a bit too risky.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Thank you very much, Achille. Yeah,
and
merci,
you can always turn around and do other things. Like once you've done the first few years in consulting or investment banking, you can work in sports. If you don't like sports anymore after a few years, you can go and do whatever you want. So just secure your first career.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that was what I had in mind. It's easier to have a more maybe general, more classic. But as you said, when you go in such schools, it's maybe a privilege also to enjoy the different possibilities afterwards. Thank you.
Exactly. And by the way, small congratulations also to the team like who have founded HEC Sports Insights, because it's also a great way for you to try a few things, to connect with the former HECs who work in sports. And so I talked about internships, I talked about secondments when you're in consulting, but those initiatives are also great to try and connect and have a first feel. If you launch an association like HEC Sports Insights and you realize that everybody you meet working in sports is actually not inspiring at all, then you have your answer and you can refocus on another section.
Yeah, thankfully everyone's been fairly inspiring so far, but who knows? That could change. Clement, sorry to keep you waiting for so long. Hope the mic issue is fixed. I think that'll be our final question because we're really short on time. So go ahead, please, Clement.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Achille, if you have 3 minutes left, it will be nice.
3 minutes left, 20 minutes to go.
Perfect. Thank you for all of you for all your answers. I'm actually launching my own startup called Datax, and as Pedro mentioned, there are a few areas where French football clubs have to be better tomorrow to increase their revenue, and especially in knowing better their fan, and that's the problem we were trying to tackle in Datax. The thing is, for both of you, Achille and Pedro, how do you think the clubs and the French teams have to deal with the fact that tomorrow they have to increase their revenue and to innovate in some areas? So spend money either for tools or for people. But how do you deal with the fact that they have to spend money, but they don't have so much money, especially in the actual context with the big drop of the TV rights in France? I would be interesting to hear your answer about this.
Should I go, or Pedro, you want to go?
Go ahead, Achille, since you're so short on time.
Hard to answer a strong question like that in a few minutes only, but that's obviously fair points, and yes, they will need the revenue diversification, and yes, they will need to find additional value creation streams. I think that when you're talking about French football, specifically in the coming months, obviously pressure will be incredibly high on their financial performance. They won't be able to budget any media rights revenue for next season. So that's kind of unprecedented in sports. I don't want to say generalist things, but in my mind, their focus, they being League One and League Two football clubs over the next few months, is going to be, or has to be, towards cost reduction and really focusing on understanding better their fixed cost structure and how they can variabilize on the cost structure as much as possible to account for the impact of lower media rights revenues, or worst case scenario, no media rights revenues at all. So to be honest, I think if you approach French football club right now or in the next 6 to 12 months about revenue diversification with no guarantee of bringing additional revenues from the start, but guarantee of having to pay for a new solution, it's not the best timing right now, to be honest. That's my very, very short answer.
I would just add to Achille's answer, saying, first of all, football is not the only sport in France or in the world. So, and second, it's easier to go on smaller organizations or smaller IP holders and prove the model there, and then move on to higher value clients or higher value leagues or clubs than the other way around. And so, for example, Mafhungo can speak a bit more about this, but we helped Scoreplay went into Worlds of League, which is obviously way less cumbersome, way less diversified than other sports, and those case studies then help them go into other leagues that are obviously higher revenue and higher value targets. So just my 2 cents on this.
Thank you so much. And another, if I can add something, and Achille maybe.
Sorry guys, I really have to leave right now.
It's okay, Achille. Thank you so much for your time.
Feel free to reach out and ask follow-up questions. And thanks again to Anu, Luca, and the whole team.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Achille, for your presence.
Thanks, Achille.
It's great to have you.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. Sorry to keep you a little late. And if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask any of the panelists specifically, please feel free to send us a DM. Or Cedric, do you have something?
Yeah, maybe one last question for Pedro.
Yeah, sure.
If you have. Yeah, you have Alpine in your portfolio, right? And
yep.
Alpine currently has some operational troubles, right? In terms of performance, management, etc. My question to you, for instance, Franco Colapinto, it's official now tonight. He replaces Jack Doan. So my question to you is, as a private equity firm, do you have any levers on what's going on within the team, or you can only witness what's going on in the team?
That's a very, very specific question. As you can imagine, I won't comment into any specific details of a transaction that we've done. Yeah, there's not a lot to say there. Each transaction is its own, and we negotiate rights and governance according to the size, the transaction, the asset, and so on. So I'll not be commenting on this specifically, as you can understand why.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. If you have any specific questions for either us or for any of our panelists, feel free to send us an email or message us on LinkedIn, and we can connect you with them. Mafhungo, Pedro, thank you so much for your time. Really learned a lot. Have a great evening. And thank you so much to everyone that attended. And yeah, see you at some of our other events, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
one.
everyone.
Thank you for
Thank you.
organizing. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.